The priest asked who gave the bride away, and silence swallowed the church. I looked at the front row pews explicitly reserved for my family. They were completely empty, not delayed, not caught in traffic. They were 3 states away, holding up reflector umbrellas for my sister's Instagram photo shoot. If you grow up as the shadow, you eventually stop expecting to feel the warmth of the sun. In my family, the sun was my younger sister, Anna. From the moment she could walk, my parents, Barbara and Richard, treated her like a fragile, highly valuable investment. Anna was undeniably beautiful, tall, blonde, with this effortless charm that could talk our father into buying her a new car while I was working double shifts at a diner to pay for my community college textbooks. I was Claire, the reliable one, the quiet one, the daughter who never caused trouble and, as a direct result, rarely required attention. I met Liam when I was 24. He was a structural engineer, grounded, fiercely loyal, and entirely unimpressed by superficiality. When he met my family for the first time at a Thanksgiving dinner, he lasted exactly 2 hours before pulling me into the kitchen. He had watched my mother interrupt my story about a major promotion at work to loudly declare that Anna had gained 100 new followers on TikTok. "Do they always do that?" Liam had whispered, wiping a smudge of flour from my cheek. "Do what?" I asked, genuinely confused. "Treat you like you're the opening act that no one came to see." It was the first time anyone had ever validated what I had felt my entire life. Liam proposed 2 years later on a rainy Tuesday evening in our apartment, surrounded by takeout boxes. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't for social media, and it was the happiest moment of my life. When we announced our engagement, the reaction from my parents was chillingly casual. We drove to their house in the suburbs, Liam holding my hand so tightly his knuckles were white. "Mom, Dad!" I beamed, holding up my left hand. "We're getting married." My father looked over the top of his reading glasses. "Well, that's nice, Claire. Congratulations. Liam, good to have you officially on board." My mother didn't even stand up. She squinted at the ring. "Oh, how sweet. A bit modest, isn't it? But then again, you've always been very practical." Before I could process the sting of her words, she swiveled her head. "Anna, come down here. Did you decide on the velvet or the silk for that audition tape?" That was the extent of their enthusiasm. Over the next 18 months of wedding planning, my family's involvement was not just zero. It was actively detrimental. Liam and I paid for the entire wedding ourselves. When I gently asked my parents if they would consider helping with the catering costs, my mother sighed heavily, looking at me as if I had asked her to harvest one of her organs. "Claire, you know we're fully funding Anna's move to Los Angeles," Barbara said, adjusting her expensive silk scarf. "We are investing in her brand. She's at a crucial tipping point in her career. You and Liam have steady salaries. You don't need our help." Anna's career consisted of posting heavily edited photos of herself holding detox teas. But in my parents' eyes, she was on the verge of Hollywood stardom. I swallowed my pride. I bought a beautiful, simple lace dress off the rack. Liam's mother, Susan, stepped in to help me with the floral arrangements, weeping openly when I tried on my dress for the first time. "You look like an angel, Claire," Susan had said, her hands trembling as she adjusted my veil. I cried too, realizing how starved I was for a mother's genuine affection. The wedding date was locked in, October 14th. Save the dates went out 9 months prior. Formal invitations went out 3 months prior. The warning signs were glaring, but I was blinded by a desperate, pathetic hope that on my wedding day, just for 24 hours, I could be my family's priority. I ignored it when Anna dropped out of being my bridesmaid, because the sage green dress washed out her complexion. I ignored it when my father missed the rehearsal dinner on October 13th because Anna was having a meltdown over her apartment's plumbing, and he had to fly out to California to handle the landlord. "He'll take the red-eye back tonight," my mother had promised me over the phone, sounding annoyed that I was even asking. "We'll be there at the church by noon tomorrow, Claire. Stop stressing, it's bad for your skin." I went to sleep on the eve of my wedding with a knot in my stomach, praying to a God I hadn't spoken to in years that they would just show up. October 14th dawned crisp and beautiful. The autumn leaves outside the bridal suite were a brilliant cascade of gold and crimson. By 10 a.m., my hair and makeup were done. Susan and Liam's sister, Bridget, were fussing over my train, pouring champagne and playing upbeat music to keep the energy high. But every time my phone buzzed, my heart slammed against my ribs, only to plummet when I saw it was just a vendor confirming a delivery. By 12:30 p.m., the knot in my stomach had tightened into a suffocating coil. "Have you heard from your mum?" Bridget asked gently, handing me a glass of water. I shook my head, pulling my phone from the vanity. I dialed my mother's number. It rang twice and went straight to voicemail. "Hi, this is Barbara. Leave a message." I dialed my father. Voicemail. I dialed Anna. Voicemail. Panic started to set in. Had there been an accident? Did my father's red-eye flight crash? My mind raced through horrific scenarios, justifying their silence with tragedy because the alternative was simply too devastating to accept. By 1:30 p.m., the wedding coordinator, a sharp woman named Valerie, knocked on the door. Her face was a mask of professional composure, but her eyes held deep pity. "Claire, sweetie, the groom's side is entirely seated, but your side." She hesitated. "Do you have extended family arriving late?" "No," I whispered. "It's just my parents and my sister. None of my aunts or uncles could make it." "Okay," Valerie said softly. "Well, we can delay for 15 minutes, but the priest has another mass at 4. At 2:15 p.m., the music started. I stood at the back of the vestibule. I had dreamed of this moment since I was a little girl. I had pictured my father in his tailored suit, his eyes welling with tears, offering me his arm to walk me toward the man I loved. Instead, I stood alone, gripping my bouquet of white roses so hard, the thorns pressed through the ribbon and bit into my palms. "I can walk you, Claire," Susan offered, rushing to my side, her face flushed with quiet outrage on my behalf. "No," I said. My voice sounded hollow, like it was coming from someone else. "I'll do it myself." The heavy wooden doors opened. The string quartet played Canon in D. I stepped into the aisle. The church was stunning, bathed in the soft, stained glass light of the afternoon. But as I walked forward, my eyes involuntarily drifted to the left side of the aisle. Row 1, empty. Row 2, empty. Row 3, empty. A collective, uncomfortable silence seemed to radiate from Liam's family on the right. I saw Liam standing at the altar. When he saw me, his face crumpled into a beautiful, tearful smile. But as his eyes flicked to the empty space where my family should have been standing, I saw his jaw clench. He knew. We made it through the ceremony. I said my vows with a steady voice, but my soul felt like it had been hollowed out with a carving knife. The kiss, the applause, the walk back down the aisle. It was all a blur. I was operating on pure autopilot, a ghost at my own wedding. When we finally escaped to the bridal suite before the reception, I collapsed onto the velvet sofa. Liam knelt in front of me, taking my hands. "Claire," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I am so sorry. I am so, so sorry." "They're dead," I whispered, staring blankly at the wall. "Liam, they must have been in a crash. It's the only explanation. My dad's flight." "I checked the flight logs while you were getting your dress bustled," Liam said gently, his thumbs tracing circles on my knuckles. "The red-eye landed at JFK at 6 a.m. Safely." I froze. I pulled my hands from his and reached for my phone. My fingers trembled as I bypassed my call log and opened Instagram. I didn't know why I did it. A sick, instinctual feeling guided me directly to Anna's profile. There was a glowing ring around her profile picture. A new story. I tapped it. The screen filled with brilliant California sunshine. Anna was standing on a cliffside in Malibu, wearing a billowing red gown, the ocean stretching out behind her. A photographer was snapping rapid-fire shots. The camera panned around, held by someone behind the scenes. "Oh my God, look at my gorgeous girl!" My mother's voice shrieked from the phone speaker. The camera flipped to show my mother, wearing designer sunglasses, holding an iced coffee. Beside her stood my father, holding a large silver reflector umbrella, grinning proudly. Text overlaid on the video read, "Major campaign shoot today. So blessed to have my amazing parents fly out to surprise me on set. Best support system ever. The timestamp, 3 hours ago. While I was putting on my wedding dress, agonizing over their safety, my father hadn't been boarding a red-eye. He had stayed in California. My mother hadn't been stuck in traffic. She had boarded a flight to Los Angeles yesterday, abandoning my wedding entirely to go watch my sister take pictures for an energy drink sponsor. They didn't forget the date. They just didn't care. "Let me see," Liam demanded softly. I handed him the phone. I watched his face transition from profound sorrow to a cold, terrifying rage. He stood up, pulling his own phone from his tuxedo pocket. "I'm calling them. I'm calling them, and I am going to verbally tear them apart." "No," I said. My voice wasn't shaking anymore. The tears that had been threatening to fall all morning instantly dried up. A strange, glacial calm washed over me. It was the sound of a lifelong chain finally snapping. Liam stopped, looking down at me in surprise. "Claire, they literally abandoned your wedding for a photo shoot." "I know," I said, standing up and smoothing down the front of my white lace gown. I looked at myself in the full-length mirror. I looked beautiful. I looked like a woman who had a husband who adored her, a new family waiting out there in the reception hall who actually wanted to celebrate her. I looked like a woman who no longer had parents or a sister. "Don't call them," I instructed Liam, stepping into my heels. "Don't text them. Don't block them yet. Just leave it." "Leave it?" Liam frowned, stepping closer. "Claire, you can't just let them get away with this." "I'm not," I said, turning to look at my husband. A cold, hard smile touched my lips. "They wanted to prioritize a photo op over my wedding day? Fine. But they don't get to come back from this. They don't get to apologize when they realize how bad it looks. I'm going to make sure that by the time they remember they have another daughter, she won't exist to them anymore." I took a deep breath, grabbed my bouquet, and looked at the door. "Now, let's go cut our cake. We have a honeymoon to pack for, and a disappearance to plan." The reception was a masterclass in compartmentalization. I danced, I drank champagne, and I smiled until my cheeks ached, fully immersing myself in the warmth of Liam's family and our friends. When people asked where my parents were, Liam's sister, Bridget, bless her heart, ran interference. She effortlessly spun a vague lie about a sudden severe medical emergency on the West Coast, looking grave enough that nobody dared ask follow-up questions. When we finally returned to our hotel room that night, the adrenaline evaporated, leaving behind a profound, hollow exhaustion. I sat on the edge of the bed in my silk robe, staring at my phone. At 11:45 p.m., a text finally came through. It wasn't from my father. It was from my mother, Barbara. "Hey, sweetie. So exhausted. Anna's shoot went into overtime, but the photos are going to be in an actual magazine. So proud of her. Didn't you have your little church thing today? Or is that next weekend? Can't keep track of my calendar lately. Love you. Call me tomorrow so we can tell you all about Malibu." She didn't even know if my wedding was today or next weekend. The little church thing. Liam read the text over my shoulder. I felt his chest expand with a sharp intake of breath. "Give me the phone, Claire. I'm going to ruin her life." "No," I said softly, locking the screen and tossing the phone onto the nightstand. She already ruined mine. I'm not giving her the satisfaction of my anger. Anger means I still care. Anger means she still has power over me. "So what do we do?" Liam asked, wrapping his arms around my shoulders and pulling me against his chest. "We disappear." It wasn't a sudden, melodramatic decision made in the heat of the moment. It was a calculated, necessary extraction for my own survival. For 26 years, I had been the backup plan, the safety net, the forgotten middle management of our family dynamic. I was done. The next morning, we boarded a flight for our honeymoon in Santorini. As soon as the plane lifted off the tarmac, I opened my phone settings. I blocked my mother's number. I blocked my father's number. I blocked Anna. I went onto Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter and blocked all of their accounts. I didn't send a warning text. I didn't send a tearful paragraph demanding an apology. I severed the digital cord with the clinical precision of a surgeon amputating a gangrenous limb. We spent 2 glorious weeks in Greece. For the first time in my life, I didn't spend a single second worrying if my mother was criticizing my choices or if my sister was plotting a way to steal my spotlight. I was just Claire, Liam's wife. When we returned to our hometown, the real work began. Liam's engineering firm, Harrison and Caldwell, had been expanding. His boss, a brilliant, pragmatic man named David Harrison, had been pushing Liam to transfer to their newly opened branch in Boston for months. Liam had originally declined because I wanted to stay close to my family. The irony was suffocating. On our second day back, Liam walked into David's office and accepted the Boston position. We moved with a speed that shocked even us. We listed our condo, selling it for cash to an eager young couple within a week. I submitted my resignation at the marketing agency where I worked, opting to transition to freelance consulting so I could work from anywhere. During those frantic 6 weeks of packing and signing papers, my parents finally realized something was wrong. But they didn't come to our condo. They didn't drive the 45 minutes from their suburban mansion to see if I was alive. Instead, the realization trickled down through secondary sources. Susan, Liam's mother, called me one Tuesday afternoon while I was boxing up the kitchen. "Claire, honey," Susan said, her voice tight with indignation. "Your mother just called me. She wanted to know why you weren't answering her texts about Anna's new brand launch. She actually asked me if you were throwing a tantrum about the wedding." I gripped the packing tape dispenser tightly. "What did you tell her, Susan?" "I told her that my daughter-in-law was too busy building a beautiful, successful life to entertain the delusions of a woman who abandoned her own flesh and blood on her wedding day," Susan said, her voice trembling with protective rage. "Then I hung up on her and blocked her number, just like you told me to do. Liam's entire family has blocked them." "Thank you, Susan." "Are you okay, sweetheart?" "I've never been better," I replied, and I meant it. By Thanksgiving, Liam and I were officially residents of Boston, Massachusetts. We bought a beautiful historic brownstone in Beacon Hill. We changed our cell phone numbers, ensuring that the only people who had the new digits were Liam's family and our closest trusted friends, all of whom were sworn to absolute secrecy. As far as Barbara, Richard, and Anna were concerned, Claire had simply ceased to exist. I was a ghost. 2.5 years passed. They were the most peaceful, joyous years of my life. I built a highly successful freelance marketing business. Liam was promoted to regional director of his firm. And most importantly, I was 6 months pregnant with our first child, a little girl we planned to name Amelia. I had spent 2 years untangling the psychological knots my family had tied me in. I went to therapy. I learned that my value was not dictated by my mother's attention span or my father's wallet. I was healed, or at least as healed as one can be with a scar that deep. But the universe, as it turns out, has an incredibly sharp sense of irony, and the bill for my family's behavior was finally coming due. I was sitting in my home office on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, reviewing a client's portfolio, when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting any packages, and Liam was at the office. I waddled down the stairs, resting a hand on my swollen belly, and peered through the peephole. My blood ran cold. Standing on my front porch, looking haggard, graying, and completely out of place in our upscale Boston neighborhood, were my parents, Barbara and Richard. My immediate instinct was to pretend I wasn't home. But as I watched my father frantically press the doorbell again, his shoulders slumped in defeat, the old Claire, the terrified, approval-seeking shadow, died entirely. I unlocked the deadbolt and pulled the heavy oak door open. They stared at me. Or rather, they stared at my stomach. "Claire," my mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. She looked terrible. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by a cheap, wrinkled trench coat. Her hair, usually perfectly highlighted, showed stark grey roots. My father looked like he had aged 10 years. The confident, arrogant posture was completely shattered. You're pregnant. How did you find me?" I asked. My voice was eerily calm, devoid of any warmth or welcome. My father swallowed hard. "We hired a private investigator. It took months, Claire. You completely erased yourself. Your old landlord said you sold the condo. Your old job wouldn't tell us anything. Liam's mother threatened to call the police on me when I showed up at her house." "Good for Susan," I said evenly. I didn't step aside to let them in. I stood squarely in the doorway, blocking their entrance. "Why are you here, Richard?" The use of his first name made him flinch. "Claire, please. We need to come inside. We need to talk to you. It's about Anna." Of course it was. It was always about Anna. "Anna is not my problem," I said, moving to shut the door. "She's going to prison, Claire!" my mother suddenly shrieked, bursting into genuine, ugly tears. It wasn't the theatrical crying she used to manipulate my father. It was the raw, guttural panic of a woman whose world was collapsing. I paused, my hand resting on the brass doorknob. "What?" My father took a shaky breath, looking down at his scuffed shoes. "The influencer thing. It wasn't real, Claire. She was faking sponsorships. She took hundreds of thousands of dollars from investors for a cosmetics line that never existed. She used our house as collateral. She forged my signature on the loan documents." He looked up at me, his eyes red and pleading. "The bank foreclosed on our house last month, Claire. We have nothing. We're living in a Motel 6. Anna is facing federal wire fraud charges, the legal fees. We are completely bankrupt." The twist of fate was almost cinematic. The golden child had burned their empire to the ground. The investment they had prioritized over my wedding had bankrupted them, not just financially, but morally and legally. That sounds like a terrible situation, I said, my voice as detached as if I were reading a weather report. But I don't see what that has to do with me. Claire, you have to help us, Barbara sobbed, stepping forward and reaching for my arm. I took a sharp step back, out of her reach. We have nowhere to go. We know Liam makes good money. We know you're doing well. Look at this house. You have to take us in, just until the trial is over. You're our daughter. Am I? I tilted my head, studying the desperate strangers on my porch. Of course you are, my father pleaded. Family helps family, Claire. We made mistakes, okay? We were blinded by Anna's potential, and we took you for granted. But we're your parents. My parents died 2.5 years ago, I said softly, the absolute certainty of my words echoing in the damp Boston air. They both froze, staring at me in horrified silence. They died on October 14th, I continued, looking directly into my mother's tear-streaked face. They were in a terrible, tragic accident, where they boarded a flight to Los Angeles to hold a reflector umbrella instead of walking their daughter down the aisle. I grieved them. I buried them. And I moved on. Claire, please, it was one day. My mother started to beg. It wasn't one day, Barbara, I interrupted, my voice finally hardening with a fraction of the steel I had forged over the last 2 years. It was 26 years, 26 years of being invisible. The wedding was just the finale. You made your choice. You chose your investment. And now, your investment is bankrupt, and you want to cash out the safety net you threw in the trash. I placed my hand protectively over my stomach. I am building a family inside this house, a real family, where a daughter will never, ever have to wonder if her parents love her. You are not a part of it. You will never meet my husband again. You will never meet my child. You are toxic, you are selfish, and you are strangers to me. You can't just leave us on the street, my father yelled, anger finally piercing through his desperation. We gave you life. And I am finally living it, I replied. Do not ever come to this house again. If I see you, or if I see that private investigator near my property, I will have you arrested for trespassing and stalking. Goodbye, Richard. Goodbye, Barbara. I stepped back into my beautiful warm home and firmly pulled the heavy oak door shut. I listened as the deadbolt clicked into place with a satisfying, final thud. Outside, I could hear my mother wailing, her fists weakly pounding on the wood for a few minutes before my father finally pulled her away. I watched through the window as they slowly walked down the wet cobblestone street, two broken people who had sacrificed everything for an illusion, only to find themselves left with absolutely nothing. I walked into the kitchen, poured myself a glass of cold water, and smiled as I felt Amelia kick against my ribs. Liam would be home in an hour, and we had a nursery to finish painting. Walking away from family is a taboo society rarely forgives. But sometimes, the only way to survive a burning building is to stop trying to save the people who lit the match. I traded my toxic history for a peaceful future. My daughter will grow up knowing that love is a consistent action, not a convenient transaction. And I finally stepped out of the shadow and into the sun.